Great. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for hanging in there. I think we're in between you and cocktails, so we'll try and keep this engaging. My name's Tanner McGraw. I'm the founder and chief strategy officer at Apto. We build commercial real estate tools for the broker, and specifically tools that help them find and build relationships and execute their deals. Today, I have the pleasure of moderating a topic that's near and dear to my heart, just kind of tech tools and its effect on the industry. We've got three experts up here to help us through that conversation. I think it's safe to say that the last 5 years, give or take, has been really amazing to see this really cool explosion of tech in our space and its effects. And I'll leave it to these three to kind of guide us there. But why don't we start off with some intros? I'll leave it to you.
I'm Karin Kraai with Newmark Knight Frank, Senior Managing Director in Chicago. And I joined the firm in 2011 to start the agency practice in Chicago. Prior to that, I ran the Chicago brokerage office for Jones Lang LaSalle and Vornado in Chicago. And I am the recent past president of the Goldie Initiative. Please stop by our booth. We are trying to be a disruptor in the leadership suite in commercial real estate.
Great. Good afternoon. I'm Dan Spiegel. I'm the Executive Vice President of Operations with Colliers International. I've been in the business more years than I'd like to admit sometimes, but always on the brokerage side, currently focused on the U.S. operations, our platform, what we deliver both to our brokerage professionals and our clients. I don't necessarily consider myself a technologist by trade, but it's certainly a keen interest of mine, both in terms of what we do, how we work, and what we service to our clients. So happy to be here.
Hi, everyone. I'm Pushpa with JLL. I've been with the company over 20 years now, and I'm not really a technologist either, although it is in my title. I talk about technology and help make sense of it, and why does it apply to the different things that people do within our company, as well as, obviously, things like this. I also wanted to say that we are big supporters of the Goldie Initiative, so I can second to go check that out. We have a lot of graduates from the program at JLL, and it's amazing.
Excellent. So if we're picking back up the conversation around just this shift that we've seen in the last handful of years, why do you think the professionals are spending their time, money, effort in technology? What's changing? What are those motivations? Karin? So
for any of us, whether we're in commercial real estate or another company, we have to, if we're not growing, we're dying. So we all have to grow personally, professionally, but our companies do. So commercial real estate tech gives us that opportunity to do so. There's tools that help us operate faster, quicker, and better, which will improve all of our bottom line. With that said, there's a lot of investment capital coming into the space right now, which is fantastic. It's a $20 trillion industry, so it's time that we got this attention and focus, right? But it makes it difficult for decision makers to sift through all the options and opportunities and decide what to invest in and why, and we'll get to that.
So I think I'll say, I don't know if the word is pressure, but the momentum for change is coming from a lot of directions. There are certainly those who are sort of early adopters, people just get interested in playing with things. So you get professionals that just like to explore how to do business differently. But a lot of the change, and we heard about it earlier on some of the other panels, is coming from clients and industries. So you work with I'll call it someone younger, or technology or an industry. Well, they want that tour experience to be something other than a paper book that might have been very common for many, many years. Or if you're working with an institutional landlord, they want to know, how you're delivering them data so they can do the analysis that we mentioned earlier. So it's coming both out of personal interest and sort of a desire to advance, but it's also coming both from the occupiers and the investors in real estate, sort of asking the service providers to change and offer something different.
Pushpa?
Trying not to be repetitive here. I feel like, how can you not invest in technology? I mean, in our personal lives, it's everything. And a lot of it is all about experience. And experience in our personal lives, and how can you make everything as easy as possible and streamlined. It's the same thing with commercial real estate, right? And anything that we do in work. And we are really focused on the employee experience, whether it's our own employees or our clients' employees. So I think it's really important there. And then to echo what Karin said, for commercial real estate, for so long, we had to take generic systems and try to make them fit commercial real estate. And with the billions of dollars that are now being invested in our industry, we do have a lot of options. It is very difficult, but we'll get to that a little bit later, I think.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing, you touched on a couple of these different upward pressures, if you will, right? The investment in the space. There's obviously a lot of tech companies that are putting dollars in and providing value. Hopefully, you see the younger generation or these early adopters moving in, but there's also this behavioral shift that we're seeing, and a lot of old ways of doing business. So in our space, 3/4 of the customers that we still on board are still using Outlook and Excel, and so there's interesting tug of war between the two. So if you reflect on the biggest ROIs that you see, the biggest impacts, what are you seeing? What are the big values that you're seeing today?
So Newmark has developed a proprietary CRM, which is slowly being rolled out around the country. And it'll be interesting to see what the adaptation is. So one of the things that we've seen is that for the folks that make these decisions, the executives, there's terrific products out there. They wonder about the adaptability and the embrace in the field, because people have to do the same amount of work every day, week, month, year, and to try to figure out how to use a really complicated tech product may or may not happen the way the leadership of the company wants it to, even though it will help everyone do their work better, faster, quicker, and improve the company. So what we've realized is that the product has to be so simple and so easy to use the first time. So we use VTS. That's one of the products that the leasing teams use, and it provides a lot of transparency amongst the team and to ownership. And owners want quicker deal turnaround and more feedback. So that product has done that quite well.
Yep, Dan?
So from an ROI, I have to say, I'm not convinced the ROI is all self-evident yet today. We all deal with so many different products, but I think where we want to see the ROI is in a couple areas. One is efficiency. It's been mentioned repeatedly, both on panels like this and prior discussions, that our business has a lot of inefficiency, just but from the prospecting to how we service clients, and we're all working in ways to improve upon it. So the ROI of using the time that we do searching, as you said, through emails, through Excel, whatever, to use that time for something that's more valuable, higher value add to our clients, is where we'd love to see the ROI. I think the other thing that we'd love to know, or we'd like to see, and I'm sure it's true of all of us, is just using ROI to better differentiate ourselves through our technology and our platforms. To our clients, so our clients kind of experience working with whichever firm it is, but working with us differently. I mean, that's a great ROI. Like if they feel like they're engaged with us in a different manner, it could be the ROI of stickiness, of having to pursue and win less business, or it's just the ROI of having a better long-term relationship because you're working closely with them and aligned with their ways.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's fun to talk about all the flashy technologies, artificial intelligence and blockchain, and all of those impacts on our industry. And I don't think there's any doubt that they will. But I'm not sure that we're not going through like a workflow revolution in effect because of those inefficiencies. Pushpa?
Yeah, I mean, so many processes haven't changed since the 80s. Right? Aside from the fact that we're not using typewriters, we're using computers. Everything else is kind of the same in some of our processes here. So that's very true. I think one of the biggest things, and I totally agree with Dan on the part of ROI and trying to really figure it out. It's something that we're starting to do so much more of, but it's not just the dollars, right? It could just be how many hours are people saving, or how many less complaints are we getting, whatever that might be. But I think in terms of what we're seeing, some of the biggest is data and around, because for so long you couldn't rely on the data. There weren't a lot of ways to easily have standards and governance around data. And I feel like that started to be a lot more, or a lot easier to do. There's a lot more tools, there's a lot more companies, and there's a lot of easier ways for us to implement that. We're also able to start getting people to actually provide data, right? That's been a struggle. And so I think data visualization is pretty big now. Because if you think about it, why do we even have all these spreadsheets and whatnot? It's to figure out how to make decisions about something. And so if data visualization and just the whole fact of manipulating data, if a lot of that is automated and just comes at us, then you don't have to think as much, you don't have to spend as much time trying to figure out what the answers are to your questions. You can just ask your questions. And I think that's some of the biggest stuff that we're seeing right now.
I think the data is such a messy problem for our space because of old ways of doing business, old tech. It's in 10 different locations sometimes. So it's a great point. Dan, any thoughts there?
On data?
Yeah, just how do we better leverage data? How do we enhance it? How do we collect it? How do we visualize it, as Pushpa says?
So a couple things I think about data. First of all, this industry sits on a tremendous amount of data that's not really structured data that you can do. The fancy things you're mentioning, AI and machine learning, we all kind of see it, but the data is never in one easy-to-use place yet. So that's still, I think, a world that we're right to the point of BI now. We can use different, Tableau and Click View and things like that to kind of interpret it, but we're not necessarily changing our ways. I think the other thing that's somewhat of a challenge in our industry, and I'll be careful about it, it's the brand names, but there are some big players in the industry that control a lot of data. And I guess I can mention them. So between, CoStar and Argus and Yardi, like VTS now. I mean, there's some really, and they're controlling a lot of our data, right? And I don't mean it's like it's a personal ownership of it, but we need to, and not all those companies are open about sharing that data. So it puts a lot of impediments into what we can do with data for interpreting for our own business needs as well as what we do for our clients.
Yeah, Karin, your data today, how do you think about it?
So in the leasing process, a lot of it is still old school. I talked to a lot of folks in advance of today, both on the tenant rep and the agency side, and especially on the tenant rep side. The terminology they used was still, pounding leather and running up and down the streets and using Excel and being really afraid to share data because it's all about information is power, and if I give you mine, then now I'm giving away my power. So there's a lot of still ingrained and embedded thought processes. Not to dispute, I agree with everything both you are saying. This is purely from the brokerage standpoint. So it's a little bit different.
Yeah, in defense of that a little bit, this is back to that behavioral change piece. We see so many people have built, phone numbers and email addresses over the course of decades, and that was their value prop, right? And to give that up now seems so strange, but to anybody that's a technologist, you can go collect that information so easily now. And so just that small behavior change makes it very, very difficult to implement.
And it's not even just the technologist. I mean, it's even, we're 2018 now, right? There's like half the workforce that gets it and is frustrated as hell that we haven't changed very much.
Exactly.
And then there's the other half who thinks they can maybe ride it out and not have to change. So, there's this balance of we definitely need it, and there are a lot of people who are very frustrated by it. So I think they're the ones that are starting to change things, and we welcome that.
Is that what it is? Like, how do we change that? How do we break down those walls to get to the value of the artificial intelligences?
So the Eastman Kodak company invented digital photography in 1975, an engineer there. They put it on the back burner because they were afraid it would cannibalize their film business. It did, but too bad it wasn't them. So that's a very simple example, but we have to progress, we have to move forward, we have to adapt because we'll help ourselves, we'll help our companies. So can I talk about AI yet and why it won't replace humans?
Yeah, please.
So Bobby Goodman's in the back. He founded Truss, and they have a very smart robot called Vera. So for tenants under 10,000 square feet, that's their first interface. So Vera asks a series of questions that narrows the field of what this tenant will or won't pay, what building they will or won't go in, and which space they want. And then the human steps in, does the tour, and closes the deal. Same with Lisa at Dynasty. That's a residential app, so that's leasing apartments. She responds within 1 minute via text or email to the person's request. She funnels them into where they need to be, and then the human steps in. So from the brokerage side, we don't need to be afraid that we'll be replaced. And I know there's talk about that, but it's an impossibility because there's so many nuances in the market, in the ownership cycle, that no AI application will ever know unless you program it in there. And that would be programming 24/7 because the market is very fluid. It always has been, and it always will be.
So with that extra time, do you have any thoughts on what happens to the broker's value, day-to-day role? Like, where do you spend that extra
They
effort?
spend that time with their clients and developing new relationships because that won't change. So now you have someone that never sleeps, never goes to the Cubs game, never is sick, never has a kid that, needs whatever they need. So they work 24/7. And they can start at the front of that process and do a lot of the legwork, allowing people to be freed up to better manage their data and contacts and develop more client relationships, because in the end, that will never change. as far as how business is won.
Yeah, I'm convinced that we actually go back more to the relationship value in the broker role. Like I think that's going to continue to be a big piece and actually become a bigger piece as we go forward. Dan, thoughts on artificial intelligence?
Well, I think you said it well. I think you pointed out a couple of things that we've already talked about, because all those things about of kind of screening that you mentioned, that's the efficiency, that's the gain that we all want. Like those are things that kind of don't add a lot of value, but if that can be done by machine, the extension of that, I think it has a machine learning and AI implication, which is once you collect all that input from people, you can maybe you could predict who's going to be asking for new space. Maybe you could predict who the next buyer is going to be, because once you collect all that data that we give to all kinds, Facebook, we're obviously well known now, but all kinds of websites today, you can do a lot with that data. So it allows to go onto the brokerage professional to be much more of a value add, because they're more interpreting information than they are like, oh, here's a run, let's go tour the space. They're doing a lot more that's valuable to the client beyond sort of the basics of assessing the needs and getting the tour organized. They're actually going a step further and actually actually delivering value to the clients.
The brokers that we see that are really successful today are those that are excellent at managing data, like that do some of that stuff manually. It's fascinating, and I think again that'll go back to the value add on the relationship side. Pushpa, any other thoughts?
A little different twist, I guess, for AI. A few angles. I know Leverton is here today, and we've been using them a lot for more machine learning and lease abstracting, and that is something that's just, talk about time consuming, talk about detailed. There's so much there, and so the more that machines can learn how to do that and take that pain away from people having to do it and still do it in an accurate way, that's huge. And then there's so much more you can do in terms of helping them better identify when is the right time to take advantage of different clauses within their leases, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's one angle. Another that was mentioned earlier was chatbots. Chatbots have mostly been used more like a customer service kind of thing, if you're on a hotel website or shopping. But I think from an employee experience side, those can come in really handy, and then we're starting to see those in some companies where they take away a lot of, whether it's employee training or HR question and answer and policies and stuff like that. If you think about it from that angle, anything that's a frequently asked question or a training thing that's done over and over and over again, why can't a chatbot do that? And by the way, we want information whenever we want it, when we're ready for it, when we're interested in it. That's not how we're going to get it from our company unless we can maybe interact with a chatbot that is available on Saturday at whatever time right before the deadline for something that we're supposed to be signing up for, right? And then the last thing I would say is just more around, we've been talking a lot about hospitality, personalization, and I think AI is going to help that a lot with preferences, right? So, we don't necessarily have assigned spots anymore when we go to work. And so when I sit down, I'd like it to know what kind of music I want, what kind of lighting I want, what kind of temperature I want. Do I want my seat really low? Yes. And, just those kinds of things, and that it will automatically recognize that or learn over time that this is how I prefer to work. And then, of course, I'll skip a lot of the buzzwords and whatnot, but of course, it'll make us more productive, happier to be there, and therefore companies are more profitable in the end, right? So I think that's some of the ways that AI is already starting to be seen for us and for our clients.
Yeah, great stuff. You mentioned clients. What kind of pressure are the clients putting on technology? How's that affecting the space? Dan?
I think a couple of ways. The biggest ways are, number one, a lot of our occupier clients are looking for, what are you seeing now? What's the latest innovation? What are our competitors using within our space? Or how can you help us better understand and stay ahead of the curve for our employees and our facilities? And that was mentioned a little bit earlier in terms of how can people save money at their facilities using different kinds of technologies, knowing that on Friday at 2 o'clock, nobody's there. Don't bother putting the AC on, right? Like, you can save a whole lot of money. So we're hearing that a lot from our clients. And then just, of course, the typical, any one of us wants what we want when we want it and as easily as we can get it. And that's the same thing that our clients are seeing or wanting from us that we're seeing, which is information at any time. And so it's really important for us to be able to provide them tools to be able to access that on their own.
You know, I'm gonna add something to that. I was just thinking about that. I was talking about the advisory role of brokers and kind of doing something beyond the search and stuff. There's also an angle, and I've chatted with a number of tenant reps in particular about actually clients coming to us and saying like, what's happening? What are you doing? Right? They're actually looking to us at times. I know I got a question actually in the ownership time. I was telling Lyndall here just a moment ago. There's a very significant owner that sent an email to us, and it comes back and it's like, you know, we're kind of behind in the CRE tech thing, and this is a big institutional owner, and there's like, what do you think we should look at? And I'm like on the floor thinking, wow, this is a big owner. But they're actually looking for us to play a little bit of a different role, to actually know what we don't have to necessarily own it, but we have to know to introduce it because all their needs are different. And I think that's super interesting. That's a super interesting change in what we do.
We've actually taking that a step further, we actually have a presentation now that we go around and give our investor clients on technology stack and how do you make sense of all of this. You know, you can look at disruption and say, I'm going to ride it out and see what happens and just feel really, really, you know, wind knocked out of you in the meantime. Or you can try to figure out how to embrace disruption and create opportunity. Right? And so that's what a lot of the clients, investor and occupiers, are looking for us to help them do.
Yeah, on the other side, I mean, the professionals, you see them actually make that part of their like competitive advantage as well, right? Hey, we're technology forward, here's what we're doing, we can add more value, we can give you better reporting, whatever the case may be, you should pick us in addition to. So any thoughts on the client expectation side?
Yeah, the clients definitely drove VTS. So on the ownership side, they were looking from us on quicker updates, more transparency, and speedier deal flow, which not everyone on our side of the table embraced. You know, sometimes they like to respond when they're ready or when they have better news, because again, it's all about how you're using information. So it was definitely driven by the clients. You know, the other technology that they want to see is slicker marketing products. So Newmark has a proprietary video book. You know, drones have obviously helped that, and VR. So they're looking for faster, better, smarter. And this is a little bit off topic, but I'm proud of my home city because Chicago leads the world in the amenity race. I mean, I hear from my New York office and have met with folks from around the world, and this is fantastic, but it also is very expensive for owners, and then they set the bar on the amenity race with all the other applications that they expect from us. So the bar's been set pretty high here.
So technology is affecting a lot of different areas for the professional. If you think about the different types, whether that be CRM or marketing, as you just mentioned, different types of workflow, we've talked a lot about artificial intelligence or the leasing stuff. What's the biggest impact you're seeing, you know, in a specific vertical in our space?
So I researched 38 recent CRE tech products to figure out where the money's being spent and where the interest is. So 61% was on leasing. Now I lump in CRM like Apto and marketing tools like 360 VR, but 61% is leasing. So that's clearly where most folks see the need, or most folks want the most adjustment to streamline and make the process more transparent.
Interesting. Dan?
You know, it's kind of a hard question because I'll tell you one thing that sometimes I have to clarify when people say, what do you think about CRE tech? You know, they'll start with, we're talking about products here, but sometimes they'll start with like WeWork. And you have to go, no, that's a different phenomenon in the commercial real estate world, but it's true. It comes up all the time. Like, oh, let's talk about co-working. You're like, no, let's talk about efficiency. I mean, it's a phenomenon, right? But in terms of what's gaining where the investment or interest, I see a lot of it, and I'm not an expert in this by any means, but on the building tech side, I mean, it was talked about the Internet of Things, you know, I've sat through meetings with occupier clients where I'm just fascinated at how they use the badge data and, you know, the conference rooms, and if anyone's seen that YouTube clip on the Deloitte building in Amsterdam, I don't know what, I can't remember what it's called, The Edge? The Edge, yeah. It's just super fascinating. So a lot of it's, and I look at that as a lot of it's on the building side. It's also on the occupancy and employee experience, to your point, because it's like, wow, if I could know where the warm part of the building is on a cold day, or if I know where to find tanner in the floor, how cool is that? What a great place to work. So I say a lot of it isn't necessarily always on the tools that we're dealing with, but it's on the occupier and on the building side or the occupier experience.
Yeah, interesting. Pushpa?
I think same along those lines. I think there's two pieces to, you know, figuring out where do you want to be, and then how do you want that space to be. So location intelligence, in terms of being able to take thousands of data points and who knows what kind of layers that you want to look at and what matters to you, your employees, and your company in terms of site selection. There's just so much more we can do where it's fact-based decision instead of gut or experiential. And the second part is then once you find that, how do you know that you have your space laid out right? So it's occupancy planning, it's workplace strategy, and it's really understanding like, you know, you don't just listen to the anecdotal stuff about how we need more conference rooms. You actually analyze with sensors. Are people even using these? And are they using only 3 people in a 50-person, not 50, but you get me. You know, are they really maximizing the space that they have available? And then are we really setting up the space in the right way? And then using heat maps and stuff, where are the traffic patterns? And so for people like me who don't want to be bothered necessarily, put me in the corner. And then for where there's really high traffic areas, maybe put that where there are people who you'd want to interact a lot with, or be able to have those accidental collisions between people so that they can talk to people they don't normally talk to, and you know, maybe encourage a bit more innovation and collaboration. So I think for me it's site selection and you know, space planning.
So as you're thinking about where you're investing moving forward, final thoughts, what's the thing you're most excited to see mature, or where are you advising people to spend their, you know, time and money and effort from a technology standpoint? We talked about artificial intelligence and driverless cars and blockchain and all kinds of things. What's the thing you're most eager to see?
On a personal level, I want the driverless car, because I don't my dream car is the one I don't have to drive. So that's what I want. From a commercial real estate perspective, I think it's not necessarily a specific technology, it's the employee experience. Everything is about employees feeling engaged, empowered, fulfilled, because to repeat myself earlier, you know, if they're happy and they stick around, or they do stick around, and then they're more productive and the company's more profitable, and less turnover is always a good thing if you retain top talent. And so I think focusing on the employee experience, there are so many things with technology that you can implement for that, and that's going to be more and more important as we go on.
So I 100% agree, because the employee experience, well, I guess we're all kind of in the same space, so it's kind of, and I think we'll disagree there. But I would say, if you're talking about it from a CRE tech perspective, I don't know if it's investment of money or time, but it's integration. Right now, I think all of us, and you know, there's so many things that come at us that, as I explained earlier to someone, you know, there's kind of like a Venn diagram where everything seems to overlap to some degree, but they don't fit together very well. So if we're going to invest time, it's going to have to be to create that seamless ecosystem that we deliver to our professionals, be them brokerage or property management or valuation, whatever, in kind of more of a seamless way and less of a kind of a chunky way that it's done now with all the technology out there. And that in turn, obviously, I think will benefit our clients as well.
Why do you think we haven't seen that yet, or more of that, or deepening of that?
Because there's a lot of CRE tech platforms that are features and not systems or not solutions. They're just a feature that's really good. It could apply to a property type, it could apply to an occupier, it could apply to it, but sometimes they miss how that's just a piece of the puzzle, right? Everything involves, you know, property, client, prospect, you know, kind of like in CRM, and all those things have to stay stuck together to make it valuable and useful to the employee, because otherwise, I think, as someone said earlier, you're just spending too much time, you know, chasing around, clicking through, trying to find things, and then it's like, to hell with that, I'll just go back to Outlook.
And we've spent a lot of investment money on connecting things in the background, right? So we know that we don't want the generic big ERP, like enterprise things that we then have to figure out how to customize for commercial real estate. But we also know that all our different business lines, and maybe even different cities, unfortunately, they might want different things, right? And if they're not buying into it, then they're not using it and it's wasted money. But if we can let people have the different kinds of things for their specializations, and then we figure out in the background how to connect this all together and then leverage that information, that's where we're spending a lot of our time around the world, is making sure that we have the standards in place so it's not crap data, and then we have the ability to have everything connected so you can have what you want and when you need it that's specialized for your business line, but we can also make a lot of decisions and be a lot smarter about things in the long run.
So just to clarify, it sounds like you guys are building the backbone and then allowing the brokers to kind of bring their own tech to the equation?
not everybody bringing their own tech, but yes, in
version of that.
theory, we're not forcing or trying to make these massive decisions of like, here's the one thing everybody around the world is going to use. I'm not saying we didn't try that before, but it's not what we're doing now.
Well, to your point, it varies both by market. You know, what they do in New York or Chicago or LA is different. And then we all have offices. Well, this one's heavily tenant rep, and this one's landlord, and that one does a lot of investment sales. You have to be able to customize that, right? Because there's no two offices that are cookie cutter.
Yeah, that makes sense. Karen, what are
And
you
it has
excited
to
see?
be a two-way street. So for all this money that's being poured into CRE tech and the products coming out of it, they have to be simple and easy to adapt. And then we all have to be receptive to that. And just remember Kodak.
There you go. Yeah. I'm eager to see the simplification of the tools ourselves. I mean, I think the thing that we've underestimated is that it almost has to be consumer-like in nature in our space to really provide value to our constituents. So thanks, everybody, for the time. This has been great, and we'll let you get off to the drinks.
Great, thank you.